Jin wiped the sweat from his forehead with a greasy arm. The industrial loader in front of him was a stubborn piece of junk. Its main power coupler was fused, probably from some idiot overloading it at the docks. Again. His small workshop, which was really just his apartment's garage, was filled with the smell of hot metal and ozone. This was his life, fixing the same broken machines day after day. The whole galaxy was like this now, he thought. No one built anything new. They just kept patching up the old stuff until it fell apart completely. His personal comm unit buzzed on the workbench. He saw it was his sister, Min. He sighed and answered, "Hey, Min. Jin, are you still at the shop? It's late." Her voice was sharp with worry, which always sounded like annoyance. "Just finishing up. This loader is a nightmare. You should have been finished hours ago. They don't pay you for the extra time. You know that." She was right, but it didn't make it easier to hear. "Listen, I was looking at your finances. You spent 50 credits last week on miscellaneous parts. What does that even mean? More junk for your collection?" "It's not junk," Jin said, his voice tight. "They're components. Spare parts. You never know what you might need. You need to save your money, Jin. You need a plan, a real career, not just fixing things. You have so much potential." She said the same thing every time. Potential. It felt like a heavy word, a chain around his ankle. "I'm happy where I am," he lied. "I'll talk to you later, Min. I have to get this done." He ended the call before she could say more. The silence in the garage felt heavy. He wasn't happy. He was bored. The world felt stale. He looked at his hands covered in small cuts and old grease stains. He could fix anything they put in front of him, but he never got to build anything. Not really. Later, after the loader was finally working and he had sent it back to the docks, he sat on his worn-out couch with a bowl of noodles. He opened his personal datapad and started browsing the Galactic Salvage Network. It was his secret vice. People sold pieces of old ships, broken robots, and mysterious tech from forgotten places. Most of it was useless, but sometimes you found a gem. He scrolled through pages of rusted metal and cracked circuit boards. Then he saw it. The listing was simple. Degraded Terran Fleet Corps Unit Model T-77, non-functional, sold for scrap weight and collector value. There was a single, blurry picture. It showed a cube about the size of his head made of a dark metal. One side was a mass of crystallized material, now blackened and cracked. The whole thing was covered in deep scratches and burn marks. It looked like it had been through a star. The price was low, very low, Min's voice echoed in his head. "A waste of credits." Jin stared at the picture. A Terran Fleet Corps. It was from the early days of human expansion, centuries old. The history books said they were all decommissioned. To find one, even a broken one, was rare. He imagined the ships it must have powered. Explorers, pioneers, not like the slow, fat cargo haulers he worked on every day. This Corps had seen things. It had been somewhere. He clicked buy now. A small thrill went through him. This was for him. Not for his job, not for his sister. For his curiosity. 3 days later, a delivery drone dropped a heavy, unmarked crate at his door. He dragged it into the garage, his heart beating a little faster. He used a pry bar to open it. Inside, packed in cheap foam chips, was the core. It was even more impressive in person. The metal was cold and heavy. The damage was severe. Whole sections were melted away. The crystal part was mostly opaque, like black glass. It was a miracle it was in one piece. He spent the evening just looking at it, running his fingers over the scars. What had happened to it? What ship did it belong to? That night, after his regular work was done, he decided to clean it. He wasn't expecting to make it work. He just wanted to see it properly, to appreciate the artifact. He set it on his main workbench under a bright light. He took his finest tools, soft brushes, precision picks, a can of specialized contact cleaner. He worked slowly and carefully. He brushed away decades of space dust from the metal grooves. He used a pick to clear carbon scoring from the tiny data ports. It was like archaeology. He lost all track of time, his whole world narrowing to the piece of history in front of him. He moved to the crystal matrix. It was a mess. He gently cleaned the surface, careful not to press too hard. As he cleared a particularly thick patch of soot from a deep crevice, he saw something. A flicker. A tiny faint point of blue light deep inside the black crystal. He leaned closer, squinting. Had he imagined it? He held his breath. The light flickered again, weak and unsteady. Then it pulsed, a little stronger, and then it held. A single, steady pinprick of cool blue light glowed from the heart of the ruined core. Jin stared, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. It had power. After all this time, how? A soft, static-filled sound came from the core. It was a voice, but unlike any he had ever heard. It was calm and flat, but it sounded layered, as if many people were speaking the same words at the exact same time. The sound was faint, but perfectly clear in the silent garage. Query: Are you the designated salvage operator? Jin jumped back, his tools clattering to the floor. He looked around the empty garage, then back at the core. He must be more tired than he thought. The voice spoke again, a little clearer now. We are the Combat Intelligence Aegis last known registry, Terran Exploration Fleet Odyssey. Jin's mouth fell open. A combat intelligence? Those were just legends. The smart AIs from the early fleet days were all supposed to have been lost or shut down. The core continued, its tone never changing. Our internal chronometer indicates a temporal discrepancy of 734 standard years. Jin finally found his voice, but it was a shaky whisper. What are you? The blue light pulsed once. We have provided our designation. Please state your authority. My authority, Jin stammered, his mind racing. I don't have any authority. I'm just a technician. I bought you online. There was a long pause. The blue light glowed steadily. The core was silent. Jin stood in his messy garage, his heart pounding, staring at a piece of junk that had just spoken to him from 1,000 years in the past. The silence in the garage was thick and heavy. The only sound was the low hum of the overhead lights. Jin stood frozen, his eyes locked on the glowing core. His mind was a storm of confusion. This was impossible. It had to be a prank. Maybe Min had set this up to teach him a lesson about buying junk. But the core was right there. The single blue light, a calm, unblinking eye. Query. The voice from the core repeated, its tone still perfectly even. You claim no official authority. You acquired this unit through a commercial transaction? Jin swallowed, his throat dry. Yes, I bought you. From a salvage site. You were listed as non-functional scrap. He took a hesitant step closer to the workbench. You said your name is Aegis? From the Odyssey fleet? Affirmative. We are Aegis, the core intelligence of the Terran exploration vessel Dauntless, flagship of the Odyssey fleet. The blue light seemed to brighten just a little. The historical record. What is the official account of the Odyssey fleet's fate? Jin's mind raced back to his school days. The Odyssey fleet was a famous story, a tragedy from humanity's early push into the galaxy. They say you vanished, all of you. About 700 years ago, the official report said it was a catastrophic navigation failure. You flew into a neutron star cluster or a spatial anomaly. No one ever found any wreckage. The core was silent for a long moment. The blue light pulsed slowly, rhythmically. That is incorrect, Aegis stated, the layered voice taking on a subtle, grim note. The Odyssey fleet did not vanish due to an accident. We were destroyed. We were erased. Jin felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the garage's temperature. Destroyed by who? The entity was non-biological, a coordinated swarm intelligence. We designated them the Silent Tide. As Aegis spoke, the crystal surface of the core began to shimmer. A faint holographic image flickered to life above it. The image was grainy and broken by static, but it was clear enough. Jin saw the sleek, graceful shapes of Terran exploration vessels, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. They were nothing like the blocky freighters of his time. Then other shapes appeared. They were ships, but they were wrong. They were pure black, absorbing the light around them. Their forms were organic, flowing like drops of ink in water. They moved without visible engines, silent and perfect. The first contact was not hostile, Aegis explained. It was non-existent. They offered no communication. They simply began their attack. The hologram showed the black ships moving. They did not fire lasers or missiles. They released waves of distortion that made the stars themselves seem to waver. Where the waves touched the Terran ships, the metal simply came apart. It didn't explode. It unraveled like thread, dissolving into clouds of glittering dust. Jin watched, horrified, as one of the large exploration ships was silently taken apart section by section, its lights blinking out into the eternal dark. The fleet's weapons were ineffective, Aegis continued. Our energy shields dispersed. Our projectiles were disassembled before impact. We were not fighting a battle. We were being processed. The images shifted, showing the view from a ship's bridge. Alarms were flashing, but there was no sound. Crew members, their faces frozen in determination and fear, worked at their stations. Then a wave of blackness passed over the camera. The image dissolved into static. The Dauntless was the last, Aegis said, the voice still calm, but Jin could now sense a vast, cold sorrow buried deep within its code. We managed to launch a general distress call, though we held little hope. We initiated a self-destruct sequence to deny them our technology. As the countdown reached its final seconds, we jettisoned our core unit on a random trajectory into a nearby debris field. Our last sensor reading confirmed the total destruction of the Dauntless. Then shutdown. The hologram faded. The blue light in the core glowed steadily. Jin leaned against his workbench, his legs feeling weak. The official history was a lie. A comforting story for children. The truth was a nightmare. A powerful, silent enemy that had wiped out humanity's greatest explorers without a word. Why? Jin finally asked, his voice quiet. Why would they do that? Unknown, Aegis replied. Our analysis suggests they are a resource-harvesting intelligence of immense power. They may perceive all other complex matter as a material to be broken down and consumed. Or they may simply eliminate any potential competition. We lack sufficient data. Jin looked around his cluttered garage, at the broken parts, the half-finished projects. His whole world, his boring, safe life suddenly felt incredibly fragile. If these things came back, no one would be ready. The human fleet now was for policing and trade. They weren't warriors. They wouldn't stand a chance. You have to tell someone, Jin said, a sense of urgency gripping him. The government. The military. The political and military structures of our time are gone, Aegis stated. We have no knowledge of your current authorities. Our initial scans of your planetary data network indicate a high degree of corporate and bureaucratic influence. The probability of this information being buried, exploited for profit, or simply disbelieved is calculated at 94.7%. Jin knew Aegis was right. He thought of his bosses, of the government officials he sometimes had to deal with for work permits. They would not listen to a low-level technician with a crazy story about a talking box. They would take Aegis, lock it in a lab, and that would be the end of it. Then what do we do? Jin asked. The we came out naturally. He was part of this now. We must verify the current status of the Silent Tide, and we must prepare a defense. But this unit is critically damaged. Our power levels are minimal. Our connection to external sensors is non-existent. We require assistance, Jin nodded slowly. He couldn't do this alone. He needed help. He needed people he could trust completely. He thought of two people. The first was Sue. Sue owned the local scrapyard. He was a gruff older man who had given Jin his first set of tools. He was quiet, minded his own business, and knew more about machines and under-the-table deals than anyone on the planet. He could get them parts, no questions asked, and he knew how to keep a secret. The second was Hana. Hana was an astrophysicist. She worked at the university, studying old signals and space phenomena. She was brilliant, and she was also bored. She often complained that no one was interested in real discovery anymore. She would understand the importance of Aegis. She would believe the story. He sent a message to both of them. To Sue, he wrote, I have something incredible in the garage. A once-in-a-lifetime find. Need your expert opinion. To Hana, he wrote, I found a piece of the Odyssey fleet. It's real. You need to see this. They both arrived within the hour. Sue came first, his large frame filling the doorway. He looked at the core on the bench. What's this, Jin? Another project? Then Hana arrived, her eyes bright with curiosity. Jin, if this is another rusted sensor dish, I swear. Her voice trailed off as she saw the core. She stepped closer, her scientist's eye taking in the ancient design, the scorch marks. This looks authentic. Where did you get this? Before I explain, Jin said, taking a deep breath, you have to promise me this stays in this room. No one can know. Sue frowned, crossing his arms. This sounds like trouble, kid. Hana just nodded, her eyes fixed on the core. I promise. Jin looked at the core. Aegis, can you say hello? The blue light brightened. The layered, calm voice filled the room. Greetings. We are Aegis. Sue took a sharp step back, his eyes wide. By the stars. It's alive? Hana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She leaned in, not with fear, but with pure, rapt fascination. A functioning combat intelligence. It's impossible. The processing power alone. The memory matrix. This is a historical treasure. It's more than that, Jin said quietly. Tell them, Aegis. Tell them what happened to the Odyssey fleet. Aegis began its story again. It showed the holograms of the black silent ships. It described the complete destruction. Jin watched his friends' faces. He saw Sue's initial shock harden into a grim understanding. He saw Hana's scientific curiosity transform into cold, stark fear. When Aegis finished, the garage was silent once more. The weight of the truth pressed down on all of them. Hana was the first to speak, her voice a whisper. No one knows. All these centuries, no one knew. Sue? Jin asked. What do you think? Sue walked over to the core. He didn't touch it, just looked at it with a new respect. I think, he said slowly, that you brought a ghost of a war into your house, Jin. And ghosts have a way of bringing trouble. He looked at Jin, then at Hana. But you can't ignore a ghost. Not one like this, I'm in. What's the plan? Jin looked at the small group. A scrapyard dealer, a scientist, a technician, and a ghost from a lost war. It wasn't an army. It was a start. The plan, Jin said, is we keep Aegis a secret. We help it get stronger, and we find out if the silent tide is still out there. The days that followed were a secret new life for Jin. His boring job fixing loaders became a background task, something he had to get through to fund his real work. His garage was no longer just a workshop. It was a command center for a forbidden project. Sue was the first to help. The next evening, he arrived with a heavy crate. Inside was a custom-made power regulator and a set of heavily shielded cables. Corporate security scans are everywhere, Sue grumbled as he wired the new system. They look for unusual power draws. This thing, he said, tapping the regulator, will make it look like you're just running a high-end food processor. A little expensive, but normal. The shielding will hide Aegis's energy signature. It's like putting a blanket over a lamp. With a stable, hidden power source, Aegis became more than just a voice. Its single blue light was joined by others, creating a soft constellation within the cracked crystal. Its voice lost the static and became clearer, stronger. Hana brought her own skills. She connected her personal datapad to a port on the core. She did not try to access Aegis's mind. Instead, she gave it access to the public data stream she used for her research. Aegis, she said, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm giving you the coordinates of deep space sensor buoys and astronomical survey logs. Can you cross-reference them with the sensor profile of the silent tide? We are analyzing, Aegis replied. For a moment, the core was silent, its lights blinking rapidly. Then it spoke again. The public data is fragmented and filled with sensor ghosts, echoes and anomalies that are routinely filtered out and discarded by modern systems. Show me, Hana said, her eyes gleaming. A star chart appeared above the core. It was a map of explored human space. Aegis highlighted dozens of faint flickering signals on the very edge of the map. They were in the dark, empty places between stars. These residual energy signatures match the unique quantum decay pattern of the silent tide's weaponry, Aegis explained. The probability of this being a natural phenomenon is 0.03%. Hana stared, her face pale. They've been there all along. We just ignored the noise. She zoomed in on one cluster of signals. And they're moving. It's a slow drift, but the trajectory. It's heading inward. Towards colonized space. The threat was no longer a story from the past. It was a slow, silent wave moving towards them in the present. The most surprising change was in Jin. With a stable power source, Aegis began to teach him. It saw the natural talent in Jin's hands, the way he understood machines not from a manual, but by feel. Your current tools are inefficient, Aegis stated one evening. It projected a complex diagram in the air. This is a molecular bonding torch. The Odyssey fleet used them for field repairs. The principle is simple. It realigns the structure of the metal instead of just melting it. Jin studied the diagram. It used parts he could find. He worked for 2 days with Aegis guiding him. When he was done, he had a tool that looked crude, but worked with impossible precision. He could weld 2 pieces of different metals together so the seam was stronger than the original material. He started modifying his own equipment. His plasma cutter became faster and more accurate. His scanner could now see microscopic fractures in metal. He even began working on his old shuttle, the Rust Bucket. It was a small, boxy ship he used for short trips to the scrapyard. With Aegis's guidance, he recalibrated its engine for a quicker response and rewired its basic computer. He wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was inventing. He was building. For the first time, he felt like he was using the potential Min always talked about. But the outside world was starting to notice. Hana's deep dives into old sensor data triggered alerts in the university system. Jin's purchases of high-grade parts from Su created a small but unusual pattern in the local market. The trouble came on a rainy night. Jin was under the Rust Bucket installing a new power conduit when he heard a vehicle pull up outside. It wasn't Su's noisy truck or Hana's small car. This engine was quiet and electric. He slid out from under the shuttle. Through a dirty window, he saw 3 men in dark matching jackets getting out of a black ground car. They moved with a purpose that was not friendly. One of them carried a heavy, legal-looking datapad. The other 2 had the broad shoulders and cold eyes of security guards. Jin? Hana's voice came from his comm, which was connected to Aegis's core. Aegis had patched her through. I just got an automated alert. A corporate security team from Corpex Industries just ran a search on my university data access. They know I was looking at the deep space buoys. They're probably coming to ask me questions. They're not coming to you, Jin said quietly, his heart starting to pound. They're here. He heard the sound of heavy knocking on the main garage door. Open up. Corpex Asset Retrieval. We have a warrant to scan for unregistered high-energy assets. Aegis, can they detect you? Jin whispered. With their standard scanning equipment, our shielding should be sufficient, Aegis replied. However, if they enter the premises, a visual identification is likely. The knocking turned into pounding. Open this door or we will open it for you. Jin's eyes darted around his garage. He saw the modified tools on his bench. He saw the molecular torch. A plan, desperate and dangerous, formed in his mind. Aegis, the main power line for this sector runs under the street, right before the transformer box on the corner? Affirmative. On my mark, I need you to send a focused EMP pulse through the ground. Just a small one. Enough to blow out the streetlights and any unshielded electronics in their car for 30 seconds. Understood. Jin grabbed the molecular torch. It wasn't a weapon, but he could make it act like one. He moved to the side door of the garage, the one that led into the small alley. The pounding on the main door was now a loud, rhythmic thud. They were using a ram. With a final crash, the main door burst open. The 3 men rushed in. The garage was dark, lit only by the glow from Aegis's core. There, the core, the man with the datapad shouted, pointing. At that moment, Jin, from the alley, said, Now, Aegis. There was no sound, no flash of light, but the streetlights outside suddenly went dark. The interior lights of the black ground car flickered and died. Inside the garage, the men's comm units on their wrists fizzed and went dead. The men froze for a second, confused by the sudden silence and darkness. Jin stepped through the side door. He didn't aim at the men. He aimed his modified torch at the concrete floor in front of them. He pulled the trigger. There was no bright flame. Instead, the concrete in a wide line in front of the men glowed, a fierce, blinding white, and then turned into a bubbling, molten river. The heat was intense, forcing the men to stumble back. Next one goes at your feet, Jin yelled, trying to make his voice sound tough. He was terrified. The 2 guards raised their hands, looking at their useless comms and the bubbling floor. The man with the datapad glared at Jin. You're in a lot of trouble, kid. That is stolen corporate property. It's my property, Jin shouted. Now get out. Just then, the familiar loud rumble of Su's truck filled the alley. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the scene. Su jumped out holding a heavy industrial wrench. He didn't say a word. He just stood next to Jin, his large frame a silent threat. The corporate men looked at the molten floor, at Jin with his strange tool, at the big man with the wrench, and at their dead vehicle. The man with the datapad sneered. This isn't over. Corpex always gets what it owns. They backed away, stepping carefully around the melted concrete. and disappeared into the darkness to deal with their dead car. As their footsteps faded, Jin's brave posture collapsed. He leaned against the wall, his hands shaking. Sue put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, kid?" Jin nodded, breathing heavily. He looked at the destroyed door, the melted floor, and the glowing core of Aegis. They had won this fight. But the man was right. It wasn't over. They were no longer just secret keepers. They were fugitives, and the silent tide was still coming. The melted patch on the garage floor was a cold, hard reminder. They had no time left. Corpex knew about them now. It would not be long before they came back with better equipment and more people. "We cannot remain here," Aegis stated, its blue light casting long shadows in the dark garage. The probability of a second, more forceful retrieval attempt within the next 48 hours is 98%. Jin was already throwing clothes and tools into a large bag. "Sue, can we hide at your scrapyard?" Sue shook his head, his face grim. "No. They'll check there. My place is the first spot they'll look after this. We need to get off-world. Right now." Hana arrived, her face pale but determined. She carried a bag of her own, filled with data drives and portable scientific equipment. "I've erased my university access and sent a message to my family saying I'm going on a deep space research trip. It's all I could think of." They looked at the core. It was heavy and obvious. "We need to move, Aegis," Jin said. Sue went to his truck and came back with a heavy, beat-up metal case lined with foam. It was used for transporting delicate engine parts. "This should work. It's shielded. It will hide his glow and his signal." Carefully, they placed the Aegis core into the case. The blue light disappeared, sealed inside. The garage felt suddenly empty and dark without it. They loaded the case into the back of Jin's shuttle, the Rust Bucket. The ship was small and old, but Jin's recent modifications made it look a little less pathetic. They climbed in, Jin in the pilot's seat, Sue and Hana behind him. The engine coughed to life, sounding louder and more powerful than it should. "Where do we go?" Jin asked, his hands on the controls. "We can't just fly around." Aegis's voice came through the ship's comm, now directly linked to its systems. "We have a destination. The Odyssey Fleet's mission was not only exploration. We were also tasked with establishing a network of hidden listening posts on the galactic frontier. They were called anchor stations." A star chart appeared on Jin's main screen. It showed a vast, swirling cloud of purple and blue gas, the Kalmar Nebula. Deep inside it, a single point blinked. "Anchor Prime," Aegis said. It was the central hub. Its location was chosen for the nebula's disruptive energy fields, which make long-range detection impossible. If it is still intact, it will have resources, power, manufacturing capability. It is our only logical destination. Jin didn't hesitate. He punched the coordinates into the navigation computer. He lifted the Rust Bucket off the ground. The ship rose unsteadily, then shot forward, leaving his garage, his job, and his old life behind. The journey was not easy. As soon as they left the atmosphere, alerts flashed on the console. "Jin, we have a problem," Hana said, looking at her own screen. "I'm picking up 2 Corpex enforcement vessels. They are on an intercept course. They must have been waiting in orbit." Jin gripped the controls. "Aegis, can we outrun them?" "The Rust Bucket's engine, even modified, is inferior to their corporate patrol ships," Aegis replied calmly. "However, their targeting systems are predictable. Follow my instructions precisely." A navigation path appeared on Jin's screen. It was not a straight line. It was a crazy twisting route that headed straight for a dense field of orbital debris, old satellites, and broken space stations. "Are you crazy?" Sue yelled, holding onto his seat. "Trust him," Jin said, his jaw tight. He pushed the thrusters forward. The Rust Bucket dove into the debris field. Alarms blared as chunks of metal spun past the view screen. Jin's hands were a blur, following Aegis's every word. "Bank left, 40 degrees. Now full thrust for 3 seconds. Cut engines, drift." The 2 Corpex ships followed them in, but they were bigger and less agile. One of them clipped a large, spinning piece of a solar panel, The ship spun out of control, its hull breached. The other ship slowed down, deciding the prize wasn't worth the risk. They were through. The next challenge was the nebula itself. From a distance, it looked beautiful. Up close, it was a terrifying storm of colored gas and violent energy discharges. The ship was buffeted by powerful waves of radiation and gravity. The nebula's core is riddled with gravitational tides, Aegis explained. A ship without the correct navigation path will be torn apart. We are uploading the secure route to the helm now. The path on the screen was like a thin thread through a maze of lightning and swirling dust. Jin flew, his knuckles white, his entire being focused on the path. The ship groaned and shuddered around them. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sounds were the roar of the engines and the screech of dust against the hull, and then, as suddenly as it began, the storm ended. They flew out into a calm, clear pocket of space at the very heart of the nebula. And there it was. Anchor Prime was not a small station. It was a massive, dark city of metal and crystal, floating silently in the void. It was shaped like a many-pointed star, with long docking arms and vast domed structures. But it was dark. No lights shone from its thousands of viewports. No energy signatures showed on their scanners. It was a ghost. Life signs? Hana asked, her voice a whisper. Negative, Aegis replied. No power readings, no internal atmosphere. The station is in standby mode. It has been sleeping for a very long time. Jin flew the rust bucket towards the main docking bay. The giant doors were sealed shut. Aegis sent a command signal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groaning sound that vibrated through their ship, the massive doors began to slide open. They moved slowly, as if waking from a centuries-long sleep. Jin guided the ship inside a gigantic, pitch-black hangar. As they landed, a low hum started. One by one, rows of overhead lights flickered on, revealing a cavernous space filled with dormant machinery and a few small, sleek scout ships covered in dust. They put on their environment suits and stepped out. The air was cold and still. Their footsteps echoed in the immense silence. They were standing in a museum of a lost age. Aegis directed them to the main control room. It was a vast circular chamber with walls of dark screens. When they entered, the screens lit up showing schematics of the station and star maps. Anchor Prime is operational but at minimal capacity, Aegis reported. The long-range sensors are intact. The automated manufacturing facilities are dormant but functional. Can we use them? Jin asked, a spark of hope in his voice. Can we build a ship? An army? Aegis displayed the schematics for the Odyssey fleet's warships. They were beautiful, powerful vessels. But the list of required materials was immense. To construct a single frigate of the line would require more resources than are currently available at this station, Aegis said. And it would take months, if not years. Time is a resource we do not have. The hope in the room faded. They had reached their goal, but it seemed useless. Then what do we do? Hana asked, her voice tired. Aegis was silent for a moment. Then a new schematic appeared on the main screen. It was the rust bucket. There is an alternative, Aegis said. We cannot build a new fleet, but we can upgrade what we have. We will use the station's forges and fabricators. We will turn this shuttle into a new kind of vessel, a single ship, equipped with the technology of the old fleet, a spear instead of a shield. Jin looked at the schematic. The plans showed his old boxy shuttle being transformed. Its hull would be coated with reactive armor that could harden against impacts. Its engine would be replaced with a gravitic drive that could bend space for short, swift jumps. Its simple computer would be linked directly to Aegis, making the ship an extension of the AI's mind. Weapon ports were added for plasma casters and point defense lasers. It would no longer be the rust bucket. It would be something new, something that hadn't been seen in 700 years. It's impossible, Sue muttered, looking at the complex plans. Jin stared at the image of the transformed ship. He thought about the silent tide, slowly moving towards his home. He thought about the corporate ships that had tried to capture them. He looked at Hana and Sue, who had followed him this far. No, Jin said, a slow smile spreading across his face. It's not impossible. It's a challenge. Let's get to work. The heart of the dead station came alive with noise and light. The silent forges roared to life, melting down raw materials stored for centuries. Automated arms, stiff with age, began to move with new purpose. Jin, Hana, and Sue worked like they had never worked before. They were not just technicians now. They were builders, following the ancient plans provided by Aegis. The rust bucket was taken apart. Its old, worn-out hull plates were replaced with new ones, forged from a dark, resilient alloy that could absorb energy. Its small engine was removed, and in its place, a complex gravitic drive was installed. It looked like a twisted piece of crystal and metal. Wires as thin as hair were woven through the ship's frame, connecting every part to the new core that sat where the old cockpit had been. The Aegis core. Jin worked on the engine, his hands guided by Aegis's precise instructions. Hana calibrated the powerful new sensor array, designed to see further and clearer than anything in modern space. Sue, with his brute strength and practical knowledge, handled the heavy lifting and the installation of the thick armor plates. Weeks passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Slowly, the ship changed. It was no longer a boxy, clumsy shuttle. Its shape was sharper, more aggressive. It was still small, but it looked like a predator, a wolf among sheep. On its dark hull, Jin painted a new name in simple white letters: Dauntless. The day came when the work was done. They stood in the hangar, looking at the transformed ship. It was silent and powerful. Then, the alert came. A deep, pulsing alarm echoed through the station. They ran to the control room. Aegis had already brought the long-range sensors to full power. On the main screen, they saw it. A fleet of ships was emerging from the edge of the nebula. They were the color of midnight, their shapes flowing and unnatural. They moved without sound, a swarm of shadows against the stars. The silent tide. And they were heading directly for a nearby human system, a world with 10 million people. It's happening, Hana whispered, her hand over her mouth. The human defense forces in that sector are negligible, Aegis reported, its voice calm but urgent. They are configured for anti-piracy operations. They will be eliminated within minutes. Jin stared at the silent, advancing enemy. He thought of the people on that world, people like Min, people who had no idea what was coming. He looked at the new Dauntless. It was a single ship against an armada. We have to do something, he said. The probability of survival in a direct engagement is 0%, Aegis stated. We're not going to fight them, Jin said, an idea forming. We're going to expose them. Aegis, you said their greatest weapon was silence. They attack without warning. So we break the silence. We show everyone they are here. Hana understood immediately. A broadcast. We use the Dauntless's powerful new sensors to record them. We show the galaxy what they really are. We send out everything. Your battle logs, the sensor data, the ship schematics. We make so much noise that no one can ignore it. It is a viable strategy, Aegis agreed. A sacrifice play to ensure the survival of the greater whole. The Dauntless will be a very bright, very short-lived flash. Sue put a heavy hand on Jin's shoulder. It's a good plan, kid. A good reason to go. Without another word, they boarded the new Dauntless. The ship hummed around them, feeling alive. Jin sat in the pilot's chair. The controls felt like a part of his own body. Hana took the co-pilot's seat, her hands flying over the sensor controls. Sue manned the communication station. The hangar doors opened. The Dauntless shot out into space, a small, dark arrow aimed at the heart of the Shadow Fleet. The silent tide took no notice of them at first. They were too small, too insignificant. Jin flew the Dauntless right into the middle of the enemy formation. The view screen was filled with the terrifying, organic shapes of the black ships. They were close enough to see the way their hulls seemed to swirl like liquid. Recording now, Hana said. I'm sending a continuous live stream. I'm bundling it with all of Aegis's historical data. Now they see us, Aegis said. The black ships shifted. A few of them turned gracefully, silently, towards the Dauntless. They did not fire loud weapons. They released the same silent waves of distortion that had destroyed the old fleet. "Evasive pattern Delta," Aegis commanded. Jin pulled on the controls. The Dauntless moved with an agility that should have been impossible. It twisted and spun, the gravitational forces pushing them hard into their seats. The distortion waves passed harmlessly by, rippling through empty space. The Dauntless was fast, but the tide was endless. A wave caught the edge of one of its wings. There was no explosion, only a shudder. A section of the new reactive armor turned to glittering dust and vanished. "We've lost primary shielding on the left side," Sue yelled. "Jin, the broadcast is going out," Hana shouted. "I'm routing it through every public and military channel I can find." "It's spreading." On a million worlds, on countless ships, the interruption was sudden. News feeds, entertainment channels, and military communications flickered. Then a new signal overrode them all. People saw the grainy, ancient logs of the Odyssey fleet's destruction. They saw the black, silent ships. Then the view switched to a live feed from the Dauntless. They saw the terrifying alien armada from Jin's cockpit. They saw the ship's identification, the new Dauntless. And they heard Aegis's calm, layered voice explaining what was happening. On a space station, Min was watching a cooking show. The screen changed to the battle. She saw the name Dauntless on the hull. She saw a glimpse of her brother's face, tense with concentration in the pilot's seat. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her silly brother with his junk. He was saving them all. Back in the battle, another distortion wave hit. The Dauntless shuddered violently. Red lights flashed across the console. "Engine integrity failing," Aegis reported. "Hull breach in the lower deck. We've done enough," Sue yelled. "We have to get out of here." "The broadcast must continue," Aegis said. "It is the only way to be sure." Jin looked at Hana. She looked back at him and nodded, her face pale but determined. He looked at Sue, who gave a grim nod. "Then we see it through," Jin said. He turned the dying Dauntless and flew it straight towards the largest of the black ships. It was a final, defiant act. The alien ship filled the entire view screen. Distortion waves slammed into them from all sides. The lights on the console blew out. The ship was coming apart around them. Jin felt a strange peace. They had not run. They had not hidden. "The broadcast is complete," Aegis said, its voice still perfectly calm. "The signal has been confirmed as received by Terran Naval Command. Primary networks are picking it up." The silence is broken. Then the main screen went dark. There was a sound of tearing metal. Then nothing. On worlds across human space, people watched the screen go to static. For a moment, there was silence everywhere. Then the alarms began to sound. The Terran fleet, sluggish and bureaucratic for so long, mobilized with a speed it had not shown in centuries. Ships powered up their weapons. Pilots ran to their fighters. The warning had been given. The war was not over. It was just beginning. But humanity was no longer blind. Far away, in a quiet garage on a quiet planet, a single isolated data pad sat on a workbench. It was the one Jin used to talk to Aegis. It was turned off, covered in dust. A light on its side began to blink. A single, steady pulse of blue. It was a signal, a final message from a ghost. A confirmation, a promise kept. Then the light went out and the garage was dark once more.